Welcome to the second episode of Idea Talks with Dr. Nadine Delicata, a medical doctor who works in the healthcare sector. Last time we discussed various opportunities and challenges of this sector, but it is such a wide and extensive sector that we decided that we should have another edition, another episode to delve deeper into this subject.
Malta's future starts with a conversation. Idea Talks.
So as a medical professional, on the one hand, you need to be transparent with the families or with the patient. But on the other hand, you need to be sensitive. How do you manage to balance the two, transparency and the sensitivity?
Okay, I think transparency and sensitivity are not opposites in this scenario. They actually depend on each other. Transparency means that I have to be honest and I have to speak with clarity. And very often as healthcare professionals, we forget that we should not speak in medical jargon, but in a language that patients and families can understand. Sensitivity, of course, because if the conversation is going to be a difficult one, then we need to be mindful of the impact it will have on the persons that we are speaking to. So always respect and empathy will always play a part. I think it is very important to have such conversations in a private environment, a calm one, not one where you're constantly interrupted or one where you don't have time and you're rushed. And it's the same for patients and their families or whoever it is that I'm speaking to. The tone of voice and the body language, we have to be mindful of our tone of voice and body language, but also those of the other party. And it's very important to allow time for questions and for emotions to surface, so we can't rush through. I've had several of these conversations, and my experience shows me that patients actually handle difficult conversations well, as long as they feel heard, they feel included, and they're not dismissed.
Does it make, I mean, you might say, but what type of question is this? Because the answer is quite obvious, but you're dealing with different cultures. So I think there is a difference with how you act with different cultures, different backgrounds, even different faith.
Yes, absolutely.
So how equipped are the people within your profession to handle such cases? Is there enough training in this regard? How do you deal with someone who is of Catholic faith, another patient who is Muslim, another patient who is a non-believer?
Irrespective of whether we have had training or not, and I don't think that, at least not in my time, cultural competence training was not a feature. Now we are becoming more and more aware of it, and even here at Idea College, most of our modules involve some element of cultural competence training for young and upcoming healthcare professionals. But my key message here is that before such a conversation, you need to get as much information as possible ahead of the conversation, and you need to prepare yourself. Because every context, every situation brings with it something different. So you really need to do your homework before having the conversation. And this would allow you to be prepared for the different cultural nuances that can come up.
This is a stressful area. Admittedly, it is a stressful area. Even what you were telling us in the first episode, what the cases that you meet every day, the workload, etc. So what keeps you awake at night? What worries that keep you awake at night?
To be honest, I sleep well at night. Oh. In the comfort that I would have done my best.
You don't have a secret technique to do that?
Meditation, maybe.
Okay.
I meditate quite a lot, but I reflect a lot as well. I reflect on the day's activities. I prepare myself for the following day's activities. And usually, I sleep well if I know that I've done the best that I could in that situation, with the best possible knowledge at the time. We're all human, so we're not perfect. And yes, there have been instances where I know I could have acted better, but then it's part of our growth as individuals too.
If your colleagues had to describe you in 3 words, what would they say?
Empathic, leader, hardworking.
If you had to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Be braver, to have more courage, to follow whatever direction life puts you on. You know, sometimes we are trained to think of the medical profession in a particular way, but in reality, the world is changing so much and so quickly that opportunities are there to be taken.
Are you a risk taker?
Calculated, yes.
So walk us, I'm curious to know exactly what is a typical day in your life. What does it look like? Walk us through a typical day in your life.
At the moment, I'm working on policy. So with policy, it's a lot about, we're making a lot of effort to not have policy which is driven top down, but have policy which is built by consensus. So a lot of effort is spent in meeting different teams in various aspects of the health service, walking them through the policy, through its objectives, how we're going to implement the actions, to make sure that we listen to the frontliners who will actually be the ones to live the policy, to implement it, the ones who are connecting with patients, touching, the day-to-day. And then integrating their feedback into what will be the final product, so that eventually we'll have something that belongs to us all, that is a shared responsibility.
This is an area which is all the time developing and evolving. How do you, or what do you do to ensure that you keep up with the developments in this area, to keep yourself up to date with the latest discoveries? What do you do? How do you keep yourself skilled?
I will start this reply by quoting our college principal, Dr. Nadia Vassallo, who says and repeats that lifelong learning is not optional. By nature, I am curious and I am a critical thinker, but I have embraced lifelong learning fully, so I'm constantly on the go in terms of reading, following research and policy developments. But learning is not enough. We also need to appraise, because not every innovation perhaps is the right one, so we need to be able to criticize and appraise the literature that we read. I also, of course, am doing research myself, so that clearly keeps you current. And besides my own research, I try to collaborate with other researchers in joint initiatives, also in our professional networks, so that I can keep as current as possible.
Of course, you were also there when the pandemic, when we were going through the COVID-19 pandemic. Those were very difficult times for everyone, but especially for the frontliners. And you were a frontliner. I'm curious to know what you went through during those nearly 2 years of a pandemic, which was unprecedented.
Yeah. It was a very informative period. I think you learn a lot about yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses, but that is when teamwork comes through to shine. I have always prided myself in surrounding myself with team members who are experts in their fields and who are not afraid to speak up and challenge me. I really, really value that, and I believe that really came through in the COVID pandemic. We showed we could perform under pressure, we showed we were resilient, and we protected patients as much as was humanly possible in the scenario.
And there was no, it was the first time for everyone, because the last pandemic of this proportion had happened ages ago. So there wasn't a playbook.
There wasn't a playbook, but we were a bit luckier in that it hit Italy just a few weeks ahead of us. So at least we weren't the ones to be first hit, because then I think the impact would have been considerably different. So we scrambled literally scrambled. We worked night and days. I remember that I used to call my team in on a Sunday, bring in pizza and take out food and all the unhealthy options you can imagine. But we would just work at it, trying to make sure that we're covering all the bases, because there was a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty. But again, this is where one grows, you know, when you're pushed out of your comfort zone and you have to take difficult decisions.
And you're quite right, difficult decisions which could have devastating repercussions, because the policymakers, and rightly so, were taking decisions based on the information that you are giving them. So to lock down for a long period or not to lock down. Other countries had strict lockdowns.
Yeah.
In Malta, admittedly, it wasn't that strict. So even and even here, I'm curious to know, even in taking such decisions, not to be so radical as other countries were. How do you feel in giving advice to the policymaker that, listen, we need to be strict, but not radical, knowing that this could be an advice which, unfortunately, could cost a lot of lives?
Yes, I think we worked very closely with the policymakers during COVID, and that was a strength. So the whole public health team in Malta was mobilized and was working with us, and it was a two-way process. So I would have a meeting with the policymakers, say early in the morning or late at night, but every morning in the hospital that I was managing and leading, I would have a huddle with my team. So there was this constant flow of information, almost in real time, you know, of what the situation on the ground was. Clearly, that helped a lot in policy and practice being bridged, and perhaps that's why we could afford. Malta is a small country, unlike other countries who have it more difficult because they're bigger, but probably that helped us be reactive in quite a short time frame rather than have to wait a lot for things to happen.
Is there something we can do to prevent the next one?
I can't answer that question. I think being vigilant, being aware, taking things seriously when we think there's an outbreak of some sort, and respecting public health officials, because they know what they're doing.
Last time in our first episode, we spoke quite at length about AI within the healthcare sector. But I would like to go back to that discussion, knowing that, and as you said earlier on, how the role of IT of technology in the healthcare is so advanced. Now, my question is, how do you manage, or how should we manage, the balance between judgment based on technical knowledge with human judgment, man and machine? Where is the balance?
I think, to put it very simply, for me, AI or the machine informs, but it is man that decides. So AI is very useful. It can absorb and analyze large amounts of data that are humanly impossible to, in a very short period of time, analyze patterns and trends. It can make us more efficient. It can really reduce a lot of menial work. But we must not forget that the algorithms that AI uses are based on data which could potentially have bias. So sometimes the information can be misleading. Sometimes it can even point to correlations which are not right, not correct. So we need to always leave the accountability of the decision, because the decision is going to involve and impact somebody's care, somebody's well-being. That accountability lies with the human. AI doesn't grasp the lived experience, the context, the human connection, or the consequences of its decision. It's the human that needs to interpret that data through a strict ethical framework, but also, you know, the experience and the training.
One final question. A 20-year-old comes up to you and tells you, Dr. Delicata, I would like to pursue a profession in the healthcare sector.
Okay.
What's your advice? Should I go for it? I'm a bit worried. I see that there are a lot of challenges. It's an area which evolves all the time. What's your advice? What's your take?
I think it depends on the individual. I would say yes, go for it. It is a rapidly evolving landscape, but then so are the opportunities to grow. More and more we're seeing the healthcare profession as not really a linear one, as it used to be before, a traditional role. So I would advise young professionals, if they like to think critically, if they like to adapt, then yes, healthcare is for them. And especially we're seeing that healthcare professions are becoming more regulated and more accountable. But also there is this fluidity now, and you're expected to upskill yourself, to learn and to contribute to not just your clinical field, but also to management, to the digital domain. So in reality, it can be quite an exciting and a rewarding career. And we were saying, we're not the type to be stuck to a single way of doing things for 30 years. If you're sort of that kind of person and you want to continue growing, embracing continuous learning, then yes, healthcare is for you.
Okay, so you are, because I already say it's the last question, and then I think
Never
something
is.
else. But this is really the final question. So you are a middle-aged professional, medical professional. Where do you see yourself in the next 15 to 20 years?
I have been lucky to have grown thanks to people who have taught me and who have mentored me. I believe mentorship is really, really important in challenging how we think and also modeling good judgment. So I've had, some good experiences with mentors, and now I find myself more and more mentoring other people, and it's very rewarding. It's very rewarding to see people grow. I hope that my experience in healthcare comes in handy wherever, the task assignment at hand. And I genuinely believe in contributing something back to the community through teaching and academia.
Dr. Delicata, thank you for your time. I hope you found this second conversation with Dr. Nadine Delicata, a professional in the healthcare sector, interesting. And till next time, thank you.